My name's Anna, I'm from Australia, and I'm part of what we call the Global Youth Climate Movement. That doesn't have capital letters. It's actually, a movement, a network, a connection of young people all across the planet in every continent who are working to solve climate change in whatever way they feel is best. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what is your plan leading up to COP15?
Cool. I'm part of a group who has been present at the last two COPs. So we were in Bali and we were in Poznan. There was even a small group of us in Nairobi and Montreal before that. And so,
should I close this gate or can it close? Where's the gate? No, there's no gate. Carry on.
Cool. So we're part of a group at Bali COP and at Poznan COP and even in Nairobi and Montreal beforehand. And we brought 500 young people to Poznan as a united youth force in December 2008. So for Copenhagen, we're planning on making that even bigger and better. We're planning on being a sort of inside the COP influence. So there's a lot of people who are planning big mobilizations outside, and we have like full support and solidarity with them. But we'll also be working inside the conference and lobbying delegates directly, doing actions inside the conference as well. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
How was Bali?
Bali was great. Yeah, it was sort of the first time that our movement got to come together and meet each other in a big international way. So with like people from the US and Canada who'd been sort of the first young people participating at these conferences, meeting with people from Australia and also Asia because they were able to be there. So yeah, one of the big issues that we have in the youth climate movement is that the meetings that we have, whether we're participating at COPs and trying to influence those processes or anything else, it's only the rich white kids who are able to be there. Like I'm from Australia, I put up, a couple of $1,000s of my own money to attend, but there are people from nations who are more affected, like in South America, in Africa, in the Pacific, where their economy, the exchange rates just mean that they can't participate and bring their own voice to the conferences, and that's yet another manifestation of the sort of economic injustice in the world that we live in, that the people most affected can't even have their voices heard at COP. So we're trying to help make their voices heard by actually bringing them along this year and making sure that we get representatives from those areas to COP and inside, and their voices are heard really strongly.
That's great.
Yeah.
So do we need a revolution? Is that the solution?
That's a really provocative question. Yeah, we need a total shift in the way that the world operates, and whether that's by revolution or whether that's by rapid evolution and transition is yet to be seen. But whatever transition is coming, whether it's fast or whether it's gradual, whether it's violent or whether it's peaceful, is coming and it's on its way. And I'm optimistic that we are going to achieve everything that we want to. I think a lot of people, when they ask themselves the question, are we going to stop climate change? They can't give themselves a straight answer. They sort of say, maybe we are, maybe we're not. But I'm really confident that we will, because I work with people from all across the world in the young generation, and in the year 2050, we're all going to be in our 60s. So in that time, we will have gone through our whole working lives and we will have executed the transition to sustainability that we need. Because everyone in my generation now is thinking sustainability already. And as we grow up, we bring the transition with us. So yeah, I'm hopeful about that. Revolution, I think we need to kickstart it in Copenhagen this year. And it's going to be one of the most fundamental reinvigorations of democracy that we've seen. For a long time now, people have been unable to interact with their political systems because of money concerns, because of power structures, all this sort of thing. And we've had the financial crisis, we've got the food crisis, we have the climate crisis, and we have a democracy crisis. And in Copenhagen, all of those are coming to a head. People are frustrated and they're going to express that, and it's going to hit the world media, and it's going to be like, okay, this is it, change is coming, the revolution starts here. So I'm really excited about Copenhagen. I think it's really important, and yeah, that's why I'm here today. So
that's great.
Cool.
Can you tell me what's COP15 going to look like if I show up there, if I be part of it? What am I going to see?
You're going to see a big, rich, white conference centre called the Bella Centre, full of 15,000 people, mostly from rich white countries in suits. And then you're going to see representatives from the global south as well, but all of the global south countries only have a couple of representatives because they can't afford to send heaps. So there's the sort of the Bella Centre, it's going to be the epicenter of activity, negotiations going on inside, a big plenary hall, countries discussing politics. And then you go outside and you're going to see tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, and hopefully that mobilization outside will be even more representative than inside. I sort of believe that the governments who are inside the plenary session aren't even being representative of their own constituencies. Like, pretty much everyone on the planet knows that climate change is a bad thing and we want it to be solved. But there are so many governments in there, like Canada and the US up to this point. We don't know what Obama is going to do, and Australia, that have been blocking progress in the negotiations. But the people of those three countries, you know, Canada, the US, Australia, they actually want positive change. So we've got a problem with the sort of democratic representation there, and this is a chance for the people outside to apply pressure inside and really see democracy restored. So, yeah. I hope that in Copenhagen it's going to be peaceful, non-violent. We've got like some activists who are advocating more violent tactics. It's going to be interesting to see what non-violence or violence manifests itself. We're going to see a lot of pressure, a lot of action, like a lot of really, I don't know, colourful and interesting stuff happening, but I'm not going to make predictions about what it's going to look like yet. So, yeah.
What would you tell someone who is wondering whether they should join the movement or why they should join the movement? What would you tell them?
Yes, do it. Like, we need everybody. There's a Martin Luther King quote that I love that goes, like, bad things happen when good people do nothing. And I reckon that the vast majority of people on this planet, like 99.9% of us, are good people who want to solve climate change. And, you know, we want the best possible outcome for our future. We want our children to be able to survive and have a livable planet. But yet only 10 to 15% of the population are activists. You know, so there's a lot of people who care but who are doing nothing, and who aren't being politically involved. They might be changing their light bulbs, but we've got to change the whole system. And we've got to get all of those people who care but who aren't activists yet to join the movement, to learn how to make political change and to apply pressure, because this is by far the most serious issue that we have to deal with in our generation. This is the issue of our time, and if people do nothing, then we know, the science tells us, that something really bad could happen. And I'm not going to stand by and let that happen. And I don't think anybody should stand by and just let it happen. They should be involved.
And what if people are sometimes intimidated by, like, the look of these activists and liberals,
Yeah.
It's such an intense group. Can you just talk to me about, why they shouldn't be intimidated? Why should, is it an open thing? Can they just come and join?
Yeah. Well, I'm an activist. I don't think I look that scary. There are different sorts of activism, and I really respect people from all sorts of activism. There's a guy called Bill Moyer who wrote this thing called the theory of social change back in the 80s. And there were activists who were, they call them change agents, so they work within the system to gradually reform the system. So they might be people who work in government. Then there are people who are rebels, so they might be saying, no, this whole system is wrong, and they're sort of trying to change the frame of the debate entirely, and they're the more sort of typical activists that we think about. And then there are change agents. I said change agents already, but I meant reformers.
That's all right. You can
cool.
start
Yeah.
it.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Cool. So there was this guy, Bill Moyer, in the 80s who wrote this thing called the theory of social change, and he said that there are 4 types of activists. So there are change agents, and they create the alternatives that we can move to. So they're like the scientists and engineers who create renewable energy solutions. They're like the farmers who know how to do permaculture and sustainable agriculture. They create the solutions for the future. You've got the reformers who work within government or within existing systems to gradually change those systems to become sustainable. You've got the rebels, who are the typical activists, who say, no, this whole system is wrong and we've got to change it entirely. And then you've also got citizens who reach out to the mainstream and they get people involved and they bring public opinion along and they participate with civics in their democracy. So there are 4 types of activism, and if you don't want to be involved with one type of activism, it doesn't mean that you should switch off to all of them. There are so many different ways that people can be involved, and each individual can choose exactly how they'd like to be involved as long as they take some form of political action. Yeah.
So, can you paint the picture for the ideal situation? If we can get this done, if we can have a successful COP15 and have the impact we want, what does it look like in this new place that is the right?
The new world. For starters, governments will divest themselves of interest in, or we'll get companies who are the polluting fossil fuel industries, we'll get capitalists who seek profit while riding roughshod over the global south. All of those sorts of vested interests will be out of politics and out of government, and governments will understand that we have to say no to these people. We have to listen to the moral voice and the global good instead. And the moral voice comes from young people who are concerned about their future, and it comes from the global south who are the most affected. So when governments start listening to those moral voices instead of to the vested interests of industry lobbyists, that's the first major change that has to happen. We'll see subsidies removed from these sorts of polluting industries and put right into sustainable agriculture, sustainable technology, adaptation, all of these sorts of things. I think we'll start to see borders opened as well. We won't say, okay, you people from the global south, you have to stay there, you're not allowed to come to our country, we won't give you visas to travel. Like, we're going to start to see much greater liberalisation of people's movement. We've had free trade in goods for a long time, but people are limited by the borders. So why do people have less freedom than the goods that move around the planet? That's going to be one of the big solutions that comes. We're going to see massive reforestation projects all around the world, and I think we're going to see big drops in unnecessary and wasteful consumption. I think people will, all throughout the world, rediscover the joy of a service economy and of craft and arts and dancing and music and these sorts of things. And our quality of life will dramatically increase because rather than going to the mall to entertain ourselves by buying stuff, we'll be with our family, with our friends, creating beautiful art and beautiful community. And that's something that I think our generation feels and wants, and that we will achieve by 2050. Cool.
That's awesome. Well, can you think of anything else? Is there anything else you want to tell us? We're anything else about what you'll be doing? Maybe your plans over the next, time leading up to COP?
Yeah, cool. One of the big projects that the global youth movement has started, it's a project called Project Survival, and it's based around the survival principle. Because after all, what is more fundamental as a human right than the right to survive? And that's really what we're talking about when we're dealing with climate change. If we allow climate change to progress, then we are denying entire nations and entire peoples the right to survive. 2 meters of sea level rise puts hundreds of thousands of people's homes in the Pacific underwater entirely. And we've got to work to promote their right to survival, because it's a raw word, it's fundamental. So the work that the global youth movement will be doing is promoting this as a principle and saying, look, you have to agree that survival is morally an important principle. In order to assure survival, we need a strong agreement, less than 350 parts per million, strong adaptation, respect for indigenous cultures when we deal with their forests, all of these sorts of things. So yeah, Project Survival, promoting that principle, lobbying delegates at the United Nations, and really pushing on everybody's ethical and emotional buttons, I think, is what the youth do best, and that's what we'll be doing this year. So yeah.